journey, as Naz said, looking at trying to break this whole financial wellbeing area down into 6 bite-sized chunks. That's been the idea of this, because I think as individuals or as companies, there's just so much to think about. It can be quite overwhelming. So as mentioned, we looked at debt, we looked at employee benefits, we looked at affordable credit, and then we looked at education, guidance and advice, and really what can companies do to implement initiatives and try and help their employees. So yeah, that's the basic summary. All the other event recordings are available, and you can watch them back and see the guests that was on there. So they're all available, and these ones will hopefully be available as well. So do check them out or get in touch if you would appreciate any of the recording links. So Hannah, being the head of wellbeing at Hayes, so obviously coming from a recruitment background, which I come from actually as well, so know a lot of the challenges. But I suppose just to start with, Hannah, do you want to talk about some of the challenges that you've found and some of the things within financial wellbeing that are happening for you at the moment?
Of course. So my first challenge is that I've got someone doing some building work in the house. So just to add to the calamity of the Zoom experience so far, if you can hear banging in the background, I'm really sorry. But in terms of what I'm seeing specifically with regards to financial wellbeing within recruitment, there's a few things that I'd call out initially. Firstly, I'd say it's really typical for anybody in the recruitment sector to be operating in a high pressurized, target orientated, commission based environment. So straight away, you're creating a situation whereby earnings can be pretty high pretty early on in people's careers. But earnings can also be extremely volatile, which comes with different challenges, clearly. Now, high earnings doesn't always equate to good financial well-being, is what I would also add to that. And it can mean that individuals get used to a certain level of income quite quickly, but then that can change quite significantly, which they might not sort of think about when they start to earn, really good money early on. So the other angle that we have to really consider, particularly at Hayes, is that pay being so closely linked to performance creates a real additional barrier to people opening up when they might be struggling financially, because that very acknowledgement of the fact that they are struggling financially might shine a light on the fact that their performance is perhaps not where it has been previously and where we might want it to be. So this can prove particularly challenging when I think employees reach specific milestones, like trying to get a mortgage, for example. In a high commission proportion environment, that can be really tricky. So I think those are the kinds of challenges that I would say are pretty, or not unique to recruitment, but certainly really common in a sales environment. We also have a pretty young demographic at Hayes, and I think that can come with challenges when it comes to try and convince people to prioritise financial wellbeing, because I think when you say that very word, people think, oh, we're talking about pensions, we're talking about things that are far too down the line for me to need to worry about, so I won't at this moment in time. And I think we also have layered on top of that the stuff that's going on for everyone else at this moment in time, the rising cost of living, increased interest rates, and everything else that's going on in the world is creating, the perfect storm in terms of what we're seeing right now. And I think on a personal level, I've had more conversations with people that I would consider to be under the bracket of financial wellbeing in the last month than I think I have ever had in the entire time I've been at Hayes, and certainly in the time that I've been responsible for wellbeing at Hayes.
Yeah, I know a lot of those ring true for me. And I've, like I say, having been in recruitment many moons ago now, but for a good 10 years, and things haven't really changed, really, have they? It's still high pressure, high target driven, could be high earnings, which is great, but all the issues around financial well-being, aren't dependent on those things. It affects us all. So really, really interesting. What I was going to ask you really was some of the things that maybe Hayes have done or that you've put in place to try and help employees within your business and within your teams.
Yeah, of course. So, we are at the very early stages of pulling together a much more cohesive wellbeing strategy generally, and financial clearly forms a big part of that. And we have 5 pillars of wellbeing at Hayes. We have my development, my health, my life, my work environment, and my money. Now, initially, that my money pillar very much started by highlighting all of the key benefits that we have that are related to financial well-being. So to start with, that would be things like our pension, both our company and also just the standard pension that we offer, our employee loan facility, our season ticket loan facility. We also have a share save scheme that runs in an employee saving scheme. We also try and highlight some of the benefits that we have access to that can offer savings that we consider therefore to come under the kind of my money banner. So things like retail and restaurant discounts, we have a health cashback scheme, and even things like the cycle to work scheme, anything that could feed into an employee potentially saving money, or anything to do with an employee's money, we sort of would house under the my money banner. What's become apparent as we've obviously gone on this journey is it's not just about actual cash and money either. It's about a whole lot of other things that feed into financial well-being. So the my life area of our kind of well-being strategy is starting to incorporate far more of the other things that we might have that could arguably sit in that financial well-being remit. So things like will writing, for example, things like our private health cover, and how that can play into that as well. So we try and promote all of these on a regular basis, and we do that via our onboarding process. So anybody that's new and comes through the business automatically gets shown all of the great things that we have access to. But in addition to that, we also try and make sure that we include our benefits providers in showcasing what we have to offer. So we'll often invite people in to deliver webinars and really make sure that we're promoting the services that we offer, to try and make sure that they, we're sort of attacking from all angles, if you like. But it's hard to keep it on the agenda for people, and I think I would also say that for us, I think that financial well-being is arguably proving more challenging than mental well-being, because I think people are much more sort of secretive. Is that the right word? I'm not even sure it is, but it's such an emotive subject, what people do with their money and how they manage their finances. And I think actually we have created an environment where people are more comfortable talking about their mental well-being than they are their financial well-being at this moment in time.
Yeah, I echo that. I remember when I first heard that, obviously working in the financial space, that it was a bigger taboo than mental well, and I couldn't believe it. I thought surely not, but it's incredible to know that is the case, that people are more willing now to discuss and talk about mental health and wellbeing issues, which is great, but also shows that there's still a lot of work to be done now on the financial wellbeing space, and lots to tackle. I was going to ask you a little bit about engagement as well, because that's been a problem, I think, from across the board, really. And maybe there was some spikes in lockdown where people was kind of forced to do online sessions, and it was a bit new. But how have you found kind of engagement, and how have you changed things to try and maximise engagement?
So I think actually our engagement has improved since we've moved into a hybrid world, because we were one of those organisations that prior to COVID, we didn't do any remote working or home working, and everybody was in an office. And that was fine if you were in one of our bigger offices. So I don't know, Birmingham or a Cheapside or a Manchester, where you've got a collective of, a few hundred people, and we can put sessions on for people. But actually in some of our more disparate parts of the country, and I'm based in our Western Wales region, and I think about Cornwall, for example, where we've got 2 or 3 offices with a handful of people in each office. Actually, it was far harder engaging people from those types of offices in anything that we did. So doing stuff remotely has enabled us to get everyone together on the same platform, which has helped massively. The way that we try and keep people engaged is that we have a wellbeing ambassador network throughout the UK. So we've got about 2,000 employees in the UK and Ireland, and each of our geographic regions has a wellbeing lead and a team of wellbeing ambassadors that apply to become a wellbeing ambassador themselves. And So it's people who haven't necessarily cracked their own well-being by any stretch of the imagination, but are people that are passionate about it and are really willing to kind of keep well-being on the agenda every day, every week, every month. So we'll always align what we're doing to, particular national awareness days, for example, so that we are constantly raising awareness of particular topics. Then we'll make sure that we're delivering content via our wellbeing network. But we are hugely aware of the fact that there is a very big difference between the provision of wellbeing content and the creation of an environment and a culture that promotes the behaviours that drive positive wellbeing. And again, that's where we really use that wellbeing network to try and keep it at the front of everyone's minds. Now, we recognise with any aspect of wellbeing, not just financial, that you can't do it to people, okay? People will want different information at different times, and particularly I would say with financial well-being, there are different stages of people's lives when different things become important. So it is important to keep revisiting that with people, and it is important that we try and make sure that there is something on offer that will appeal to everybody at some point in their career lifespan with us. But it is a constant challenge because it's a real battle between how busy they are doing their day job and how high they prioritize engaging with some of the content that we provide. And I think that's where we've really looked to try and tailor that a bit more specifically. And obviously some of the work that we've been doing with you and Let's Improve Workplace Wellbeing, and looking at how we can offer, a more tailored solution that will really split into different sections, the stages of life that people are at, and therefore what might be relevant to them, but also then to try and offer, an even more personalized service by offering access to one-to-one, advice sessions that people can really benefit from far more than a one-size-fits-all model.
Yeah, sure. Just on that point, if anyone, we've got the chat facility open. I think Nuz is looking at that. If her technology allows, she's having a bit of a nightmare with the technology, which we all have, so don't worry, Nuz. But feel free to ask any questions in that chat, and we can try and come to them straight away or at the end of this interview. Just focusing on that, actually, Hannah, I've seen, so important that it's any type of benefit really, and specifically when it comes to financial wellbeing, that it is all linked to real life events, a long life's journey. It keeps coming back to that. And the challenge has been when we sort of started to design our workplace wellbeing, financial wellbeing sort of program, was that it needed to be relevant to all ages, at all stages of life, all levels of salary as well, from sort of entry, graduate level, right the way through to people getting towards the end of their careers. And that's a real challenge. But I'm just wondering, again, if you want to go into a little bit more detail about the specific challenges you've seen with your demographics within recruitment, which I think are quite universal actually across the board.
Of course. So, I think we have two completely different separate schools of thought on it, in the sense that we have some entry-level employees that we assume might want support with things like money management. They perhaps not worked before, they're not on the property ladder, and therefore how can we make sure that we give access to all of those kind of support services to those individuals. We then have our kind of, mid cohort of employees who've perhaps been here for quite a while. We think, they're on the property ladder. So what might they need help with? Is that potentially going to be about planning for the future? Have they got a family yet? What are the implications of that in terms of their financial well-being? And then we've got our much more experienced people who've been here for many years, who you might think, well, how can we help them? But I think, it's only through talking, and certainly a lot of the work that I've done with you has been around understanding that there's always more that you could do to improve your financial well-being. So this is not just about, which, if I'm completely honest, way back at the start of this journey for me, I thought it was much more about how do you support people who are in debt, or how do you help people get on the property ladder, not how can you maximize the returns that you're getting from investments, what could you do to make your financial well-being even better, and simplifying that. Because I think that's the other thing that we see, is that people don't understand some of the aspects of financial well-being, and if they're not comfortable talking about it, they don't know what questions to ask, they feel a bit silly, and therefore how do they approach that? So what we've really tried to ensure that we're doing is make that information as accessible and as simple as possible, and as clearly signposted as possible, so that people can access what they need when they need it. Because as you say, there'll be things that aren't relevant to me now, but were 5 years ago, and things that will be again in the future. So we know when we support national awareness days, so for example, as an example, Pensions Awareness Week, we'll run sessions in that week. We know that not everybody will attend those sessions because a lot of people won't feel it's relevant at that moment in time. But then knowing that that information is housed on our intranet, in our financial wellbeing section, so that people can revisit it when it is relevant, is probably the best way for us to improve and increase our engagement and make sure people are able to access what they need when they need it and when it's relevant to them.
Sorry, mine started to play up then. I think it's contagious, as tech was already starting to. I think I was just going to say the calendar of events is really useful, and sort of sticking to an agenda for a 12-month period can be really good, which you've done. And I echo that a lot of people think there's a misconception to think that financial well-being is only for one demographic, for people that are either at one end of the scale, should we say, and that's why I think we implemented a financial wellbeing scoring system that people can use themselves, or that we can work with people on to find out where they're at, what they do or don't understand, and what are the next steps. What are their areas of focus, and you might have a whole range of people that are in quite a bad way, and are struggling to make ends meet and get through each month, might have debts, spiraling debts, and need to know where they can go, or people that just need more education on later life events, which is just important. We're all at different stages. I think that's a key thing for employers to understand, that every company, are going to have employees at a whole range of different stages, and it's really, really a challenge, I suppose, to adhere and cater for all of those needs. Yeah. Go on, Liz, sorry.
I was just thinking we could go to the chat and get some of the questions that are coming through, because I think it's often, when we think about financial well-being, it's quite scary. It's, as Hannah said, it's that elephant in the room that people don't tend to want to broach or ask. So really good question. Where could an organization begin if they wanted to explore provision to support financial well-being for their employees? Where was your starting point?
So I think we used a few different things. As I said, we started by looking at our existing benefits providers and understanding what they had to offer when it came to financial well-being. And I think, for example, our EAP was the starting point for me, which was the first time that I'd really kind of considered the different stages of life cycle, and therefore what might be relevant from a financial well-being perspective. There are so many resources out there. That's arguably part of the problem. You Google financial well-being and you just get absolutely bombarded, don't you, with hundreds of different things that you could look at. And I have to say that's where I've really drawn on the Let's Improve Workplace Wellbeing Network, because I sort of see that as a trusted group of individuals who know what they're talking about, and therefore have been, reassured that I'm talking to people who are going to share really practical things that have worked, and are able to help us do the same. So certainly what we are now doing moving forward is very much shaped around this model of having different interactive webinars, which we're working with Ryan on, and also the one-to-one sessions that we'll be able to offer moving forward.
Thank you, Hannah. That's really good. And Emma, it's, for your reassurance, it's always evolving. I think different organizations have taken a different approach. Some have used check-ins with their people to understand, is it a question that you can broach and ask, but definitely continue the conversations. I'll just go to the next question, which is quite an interesting one, and I think it's one that we often ask, and it could be open to, I guess, Ryan or Hannah or even Harriet, is in terms of what would you say is the responsibility of the organization in regards to financial well-being as opposed to the staff member? There's a duty of care in regards to protective characteristics such as a disability, etc., but not so much with finance, which is an interesting one. Actually, it's an interesting question. Hannah, could I start with you?
Yeah, I mean, my own opinion on this, and this is my personal opinion, is that there has been a shift towards employees being more responsible for all aspects of well-being. And I think if you'd have asked me this question 5 years ago, my answer would probably have been very different to what it is today. And I think one of the silver linings of COVID has been that employee wellbeing has been permanently shifted to the top of the agenda, and with that comes a degree of responsibility for financial wellbeing. Where I think the line sort of stops, if you like, is you can offer, as I say, all of the content and advice and support in the world, but if your employees don't want to take that, that also has to be respected. And I think financial wellbeing is that area where still some people wouldn't dream of talking to their employer about it, because they still see that as something that's really private and personal and that they would like to keep separate from work. So I certainly think an employer has a duty of care to have resources that they can offer an effective signposting. But it's very much, I believe, about the same, as all aspects of wellbeing. It's about empowering employees to be able to make the right decisions and choices, as opposed to actually doing it to them.
I'd agree with everything, as I normally do, with what Anna said, but it's having worked in this space for sort of over 5 years, there's been companies that have been doing this for a long time, have been doing this for 10 years plus, having these sorts of services available. And I think, as you've said, the line, the light has been shone even greater on this, which has sped up the whole process. So organisations are almost feeling obligated to do it, which is good. They should do. But for me, the responsibility has been increased by on the employer's side, but ultimately is going to come down to us as individuals. That the role, I think, for the companies is to give access, give options, signpost, try and protect their employees with good providers, because the alternative is, with any of the areas that we've covered over the last 6 sessions, whether it's affordable credit or education or advice or whatever it might be, there's lots of organisations out there, and some are better than others, and some actually, we could get in trouble with as individuals. You've got to be protected. So I think that's probably the line where it stops, of giving access to options. Ultimately, then employees and individuals have to take it upon themselves to take action, really.